Alright, hello and welcome to what was supposed to be a live stream, but then life got in the way, so I decided, you know what, I'll go ahead and record myself going through this, and then I'll make it a premiere video so that I can live chat with you at least while you're watching it, and of course answer questions after the fact as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and as you can see on the screen, I have a few resources here. Oh wait, this side. A few resources here that are also linked below. But basically, today I'm going to go over the resources in my Successful Start Designing Your First Week of Class series that includes a free workbook and then a series of blog posts and a series of videos. So the link below will give you access to the workbook. It's part of my resource library. So I have a lot of free content on there that if you sign up, you can access. And one of the things is the workbook. It's a little over 60 pages, kind of brings you through the 5 elements of this series, which is creating your syllabus, creating your course schedule, thinking about icebreakers for week 1, the major assignments you're going to design and have throughout the semester, as well as potentially a self-assessment that you have students do to get a sense of where they're at the beginning of the semester. So for each of those 5 things, there's 5 sections in the workbook, and there's 1 blog post and 1 video about each. So today I'm going to kind of guide you through this series so that you can kind of see like where to get started, any tips that I might have in addition to the ones that are already there, especially now with Hyflex teaching. That's more common, at least in my situation, or even online teaching as well. Right, so I do have my camera here, but my screen is over here, so I'll be moving back and forth throughout this basically webinar. Okay, so let me go ahead and move this along, and I'll go ahead and show you. Okay, there we go. So just so you see, this is the free resources that you can see in my library. So on the bottom here, I have all the various PDFs I've created, but all the way at the top, the first large resource is the workbook. So you can just click on it and you'll get access if you don't have access to it already. When you sign up, you also get on, I think, the thank you page, gives you the link to it too. But basically, it looks like this. So 71 pages. And just so you know, so it has here all the sections where you can find it in case you're interested in one particular element and not all of them. So maybe you want ideas for major assignments, or maybe you want ideas for how to design a course schedule and really scaffold it. You can go to whatever section you want in the workbook. But what I have here, if you go on down, is this section, this page where it has a full series. You can actually see, so you can see the dates where it originally went live. But if you click on each of these, it actually takes you to the blog post and the video that I name here. So this one page takes you to all 10 of the resources that you'll find online. So it makes it easy to use whenever you need it. If you want to go back to a certain video or blog post, this page will be very helpful for accessing them. Okay, and again, feel free to leave comments on the poster videos so they do answer those as they come in. Now moving on down. So the first section is the syllabus, right? Of course, that's what you're going to create first, just to get a sense of, what policies and what information is needed for your students. So what I have here, I start by basically saying, there's going to be some institutional requirements and some department requirements. Okay, your university will have, hey, you have to have, for example, the disability services policy, or maybe accessibility services, if that's what it's called instead, policy, which basically says, we will accommodate any students who have a disability and they need accommodations. Go ahead and go to the services building. Here's a phone number. Here's the address if you need to get an accommodation card, right? So something along those lines is basically in every syllabus. So you have to see what wording is required by your institution. Okay, so that's an example of an institutional one. And then departmental, this depends, maybe there's none, but you might have, for example, an attendance policy that's departmental, right? So it might be, you could have 3 absences, but then after that, it's this many points off. Or you could have 5 absences, but then after that, this happens. You have to be in class at least 60% of the time. If not, you automatically fail, right? So I have been in departments that have this kind of policy. So you want to see, are there any requirements from your department that has to go in your syllabus as well? Because if so, obviously it's very key that it's there when you have the syllabus on the first day of class for your students. Okay, so that's what I have. Start with what's required of you, and go ahead and you can just write it down in the workbook right here if you want to, so you know, okay, these need to go in my syllabus before I can give it to my students. Okay? But then after that, it's okay. Now you're going to start going and adding in your own policies, right? So you might have a sense of, well, I know what syllabi look like. I've been a student for a really long time. But then if you want to, I'm going to go ahead and show you the blog post, right? So this one is about the course syllabus. And what I have here is examples of the elements of syllabi that I've created. So if you go on down, you'll see I start with the course title, and then I have some examples of courses I've taught. And then now the instructor and class information, right? So what name are you going to go by? What is your course and your section number, the times they meet, your classroom, your office hours, your email, right? So just the basic instructor information will be key here. And then kind of going down from there, had the course description, right? So describe what is it that your course is about. Maybe you have one that's in the course catalog that you include, but then you might have something a bit more specialized in your own words as well that can be helpful, especially if you're like theming the course, for example. And so I do have an example of that as well for you to see, you know, 2 different ways that I've added course descriptions before moving on to course goals. Okay, so I always do bullet points with this rather than paragraph form to make it really easy for my students to see, hey, here are the goals of this course. Okay, so I have examples of those as well. And then I teach literature courses, so of course I have required text, and so you might have a textbook or not. Maybe you're just going to have like free resources online that you link to the Canvas or LMS system. That's fine too. But if you do have required text, you know, or just required materials, you have to have a notebook, you have to have a pen, paper, you have to have this, right? So I put that under other requirements, but you might just have only this if you don't have any books to add to the list. Okay, and then maybe you have optional text. So I do say, hey, you can bring a laptop to class. It can make things easier to read the online digital work rather than printing it out or taking a lot of notes and then bringing that to class instead. Just bring your laptop if you can, right? So I do have under optional. And then after that, major assignments. I keep this simple. I just go ahead and name them and then say how much they're worth towards a total grade. I don't actually describe them in the syllabi because that makes them a lot longer, which could be a deal breaker for your students. So I just say, hey, here are the names of the major assignments, and we'll go through the assignment sheets pretty soon anyways. Now, the grade breakdown, this depends on your university, so you might have it like this with the 90 through 100, or maybe you have A, A-, B+, B, B-, right? So those would be different. This is from Illinois State, which only has the simple range. Okay, so you'll have that in there as well. One thing I do is I actually say underneath, I offer multiple extra credit opportunities so I don't round up grades, right? So kind of give them, hey, you want to get that 90, you want to get that 80, if you want to have the A or the B, right? So that's something I do. Maybe you do round, maybe you don't, but I tell them underneath the grade breakdown. And then we get to policies. Okay, so some of these are going to be required, as I mentioned before, but then in my case, I have, participation in my attendance policy. And then I have student behavior, right? Respect each other, respect me. If not, you're going to be asked to leave the classroom. Late work. Do you accept late work or not? What exactly is your policy? I do, and I think you should as well. But if you don't, you want to make that clear in the syllabus so they know in advance, I have to turn things in by deadline. Or if you do, here's what she accepts or he accepts when it comes to late work. Yeah. And then the boilerplate policies, which are the ones that are required. So in this case, accommodations, the plagiarism, academic dishonesty. I add student counseling in there, academic assistance. So these are resources for my students that I make sure to include at the end of my syllabi in case they need these resources. So while the accessibility one and academic dishonesty ones are required, I think, anywhere, I add these other ones so it's helpful for them. It's easy to find in my syllabus. Okay, and so again, this is really helpful for giving you examples, but of course you can make your syllabus your own. So I have that, and then if you go to the actual series on my videos, Successful Start, which I'll link in the description, we start all the way in the beginning with how to prepare and teach a course. I talk about the workbook there, but then the first one is creating a college syllabus, and I talk about a bit of like tips and advice based off my experience with my syllabi. So that's what this video is as well in connection to the first post. Okay, and it is at the end of the post in case you want to watch it from there rather than on YouTube. It'll be available in either case. Now moving on from that, the next section that I have in the workbook let's go ahead. So as you can see here, I give information about what I include in mine. I give you space to do your own drafting of your course description and goals, your major assignments, right, and how much you're going to be worth, the grade breakdown. So basically, I walk you through creating your syllabus in this workbook piece by piece. Okay, so I do have ideas for what kind of policies you can include as well that I listed right there. And then, of course, you have space to draft your own. But then going on down, the next section is creating your course schedule. Okay, and so schedule is really important. Obviously, how much detail you go into is going to be up to you. But again, I do have a blog post that shows examples of how I do it, right? So what are the basic design elements? I do a chart rather than like a list form, which I've seen before. So I go over what my columns have. So I have 3 columns in my course schedule. One that has here the days of the week, you know, the exact like April 2nd and April 4th are week 1, right? And then I have after that in the middle section, the class topics. So a very general sense of what are we going over that week. And then on the third one, any due dates for major assignments or any other important information that I have to include, like maybe there's no class on one day because of a holiday or it's spring break or whatever the case may be. So I have those 3 columns and then 1 row for each week of the semester. Okay, and underneath it, I might do some short announcements. This is kind of a schedule, it's subject to change. Or this isn't on the schedule yet, but it will be soon, right? So in case you have any of those. Okay, but then here I have, again, examples. So this is my Literature for Children course. It's an undergrad course for mainly majors who are in education. But here's what one of my schedules will look like, right? So again, I have the weekdays, the topics, and the due dates. And as you can see here, I list the exact days of the week that I have class. And then I have, here's basically we're going to go over, right? So it's not super detailed, but they have a sense of these are the topics of that week. And then I list the deadlines on the right here, okay? And I bold the ones that are for everyone. Everybody has to turn these things in on these days. And the ones that are not bolded is because it's a group project that they can turn in whenever their group goes, right? So that depends on the week, as well as these Learn Analysis posts as well. They're optional. They only do a certain number. So I don't bold those because not everybody has to turn it in on those days. It depends on what the situation is, okay? So that's an example of the schedule as well as my important notes that I have at the bottom there, right? And so I give more information here about why I don't have certain things bolded and why I do, in case you want to have more information. And then I have a second example here as well from another course. Okay, so the blog post can be helpful to give you ideas for how to scaffold it. Again, we have a video about it that talks more about my experience with this. But in the actual workbook, I basically explain how to curate the schedule, how to kind of scaffold it together, and then what you can potentially do to get started in drafting your own. Things to keep in mind, like you might want to have some wiggle room between, hey, Unit 1 and Unit 2. We're going to have one day in between that's like catching up with anything you are confused by before we move on, or let's take a light day and do like a light kind of activity just to kind of, you know, clean the palette, right, of the semester. Maybe you have those built in so that if something is delayed in the unit, you have the extra day that you can use if you need to, for example, move back the deadline, right? I don't always do this, but it is an option in case either you don't have enough things to do in your syllabus, right, in your schedule, or you want to make sure that, you know, if things fall behind, I do have some wiggle room built in to the actual schedule, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, and again, you can draft your own right in here if you want to, or you can just create your own table using Microsoft Word or, you know, Google spreadsheet, or the case may be. But I do have a page here in case you want to draft your own. Okay, and so you always want to look at your institution's academic calendar to see the holidays. One is spring break or Thanksgiving break or whatever breaks you might have. You want to double check that they're accurate in your schedule so you know, hey, like what classes do I actually have and which ones I teach on a Monday and there's a holiday, right? So this day isn't available to me, okay? So you want to make sure that you check the academic calendar when you're creating your schedule, okay? And so that's just some more information and advice about creating your course schedule, and then notes here as well, okay? Now with Hyflex teaching, I don't change my course schedule that much, though I do feel that sometimes it takes a bit longer to explain things, so I do take a slightly slower pace than I would with a regular face-to-face class. So that's something you might consider as well, not just adding in the wiggle room days, but kind of considering, okay, I'm only going to do this one activity on this day and this probably this other activity on this day, rather than doing maybe 2 on one day like you would in a regular face-to-face classroom. You might want to think about it's going to be slower, right? So maybe you talk about fewer topics in the semester, or maybe you make sure that you have, you know, shorter activities rather than the longer ones you usually do. So you do want to think about that when you're thinking, well, I'm teaching online, or I'm teaching hybrid, or whatever the case may be, versus face-to-face. How will that change the pacing of my schedule? Okay, something to definitely consider. Okay, and so the next one is icebreakers, right? So once again, I have a blog post that goes over various ideas, right? So things that are important to remember about an icebreaker, keep it inclusive. If there's any combinations you know about, you want to make sure that your icebreakers match well. So if you have a student who's blind, or you have a student who's hard of hearing, or you have students who have mobility issues, make sure that your icebreakers can work well for any type of student, okay? And so sometimes you'll know what accommodation they need immediately. But then other times you won't know until you show up day one and you realize, oh wait, I have a student who has mobility issues. I can't do what I anticipated doing for the icebreaker. I have this other one instead that doesn't require moving around. Okay, so you do want to have a few ideas in your back pocket to make sure that it will work for the students that you actually have show up on your first day or your first week of class. Okay, so inclusivity is really important, and I talk about that here, right? The importance of inclusive icebreakers. For me, I think it's important to learn student names as soon as possible, unless you have like 100 students in one class, right? And so I tend to do icebreakers that require them to say their name constantly, so I can start remembering them as soon as possible. So that's something to consider as well when you're doing yours. I give an example of how I do this. And then also, you want to remember that in my case, I like doing icebreakers that can relate back to the course topic, so I can learn about what they already know or what interests them about our class. Right? And so in this case, here's class bingo, which I love doing, and all the prompts relate to children's literature because it's a children's literature course. Okay, so I do go over this icebreaker. If you're looking at the workbook, I describe, I believe, 7 different icebreakers in this workbook. And again, these were for face-to-face classes. So you want to see how well they work for your particular situation. But you can see, like I said, that class bingo one, and then these other ones as well. I do have, if you go to the playlist, I have obviously the icebreaker one that was originally there. I did add a second one where I talked more about icebreakers. But actually, if you go to, let's say, my channel and then my playlist, you'll see that one of them, oh, it was that one. I actually have a whole playlist of icebreaker ideas, okay? And so there's quite a few videos about this topic at this point in time. So there's a new one coming up tomorrow as well. That's one icebreaker for each situation: face-to-face, online synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid, and Hyflex. So subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss that. But I do have a whole playlist of icebreaker ideas that you can use if you're looking for more ideas for what to do in your classroom. Okay, so obviously, as you can see here, I have various playlists for teachers. Let me pause that. Okay, but this is the one that's the Successful Start series, right? And so in the workbook, you do have examples of various icebreakers. And then because I did Hyflex teaching last semester, what I have created is this, it's a course, but it's actually, mainly it's just a PDF. And so it's 11 different ideas for Hyflex activities. And then I have some ideas and some templates for you that you can use as well. And I give you tips on how to actually use the templates. But in the collection, which this is it, right? I do have 3 icebreakers as well listed along with the other various activities, right? And so I use Kahoot a lot. It's why I have the tutorial that went live on Tuesday. But I have 3 more on here. One being class bingo, but this one is a general prompt list rather than children's literature in case you want it for your class. This can work for you. But then I also have new icebreakers that are not in that workbook or in this series. And again, I have templates for the Kahoot icebreaker. You can just literally copy and paste it into your own Kahoot account. And then again, I have other activities, small class ones, some templates, and a large activity as well. So that's, again, in case you want that, I will link it below, but you definitely do want to have icebreakers during week 1, in my opinion, because it's a great way to start building the community, start getting to know your students, start getting them talking in class, getting to know their names. There's so many ways that it can be helpful. And so here are just some ideas of what you can do and different modalities for your students in terms of icebreakers. And if you want to take notes on ones that you're going to be doing that are different, or how you're going to redesign them, there is some space here for note-taking. Okay, and then moving on, we have here the building block, right? So 4 major assignment sheets. And now, in my case, I have here how to actually design your assignment sheets because in my opinion, they should have certain pieces of information in them. I do have links to some of my assignments that I blogged about in case you want to see descriptions of those. Okay, but in this case, I kind of have a sense of here are some activities that I've designed, here are some descriptions of courses I've taught if you want to have ideas for assignments, and then in the blog post, I go over major class assignment types and why I use them. Okay, so group project, for example, and I have an example of one here. And again, I talk about why I use them, and an individual presentation, right? So I have my students present usually at the end of the semester, and so I talk about that. A personal narrative at the beginning of the semester, just like getting to know my students one-on-one, right? And have them know that I'm interested in who they are as people individually, not just as a student. So assignments with options, like I mentioned in this course schedule and the scaffolding, I do have some where here are 8 options, you're required to do 3 at some point in the semester. So I do like doing that in my classes. And then, of course, I teach literature and writing, so I have a long written assignment as well. That's usually at the end of the semester, a research paper, something along those lines. Creative projects I really like because I do think it can get students more interested in my course. So I don't always do this, but I try to as often as I can. Okay, and again, here's more additional resources of things I've curated that connect, and also things that I found connected to creating course assignments. Okay, but as you have here, here's giving an example of how you create your assignment sheets. Keeping it as short as you can, but not too short, right? Because then students are lost. Making it too long means that they won't actually read the whole thing. So I do think having things that you bold throughout the assignment sheet, so like really emphasize, hey, remember, make sure you read this, could be helpful as well. But then I go here of things to include in your assignment sheet, right? So the name of the assignment, obviously, how much the assignment is worth, so it's 20% of your grade or 5%, whatever the case may be. A description of what the assignment involves and the instructions to it. Okay. Format requirements. How long does it have to be? Is it in a certain MLA or APA? Do you have to turn it as a PDF? That kind of stuff. The grade breakdown, right? So how is the thing being graded? And then obviously when is it due and how is it being submitted? Okay. So some uncommon elements that you still might want to consider. Maybe a list of assignment goals. I usually at the beginning of my assignment sheet saying, here's a goal or goals of each assignment. Here's what you're trying to accomplish. And let me tell you what the actual assignment is. So maybe learning outcomes very similarly as well. So your office hours, maybe as a reminder for in case they need it. The late work policy, maybe a reminder from the syllabus, put it in your assignment sheet as well. And so again, helpful resources. Here's this material that can help you with assignment. Here's this video, whatever the case may be. So a few things you might consider including in your assignment sheets. Okay, and so again, some paper to take notes and write down your ideas for your assignments and your assignment sheets. Okay, and the last section is a student self-assessment. Now, this might not be for everybody, but I do think it can be very helpful for the first week to have your students do some kind of questionnaire or small activity that gives you a sense of how much they know about the class, content, how much they already have in skills related to the class, right? And so again, I have my blog post here that talks about creating one, right? And how you go about deciding on the goals of your assessment. Do you want to just give them like, here's a list of questions, tell me about your experience? Or it might be, hey, do this activity that proves your ability to do this, right? So it depends on what you want. So I do go over in this blog post, hey, what exactly do you want to accomplish with your assessment? And then once you know that, go ahead and how you decide, how to format it, what medium you'll use for it, and how you actually create it. Okay, so this is a pretty long one that tells you exactly how I approach creating an assessment and what you do with it once they turn it in to you. Okay, so I do recommend once you get it back from students and you get a sense of patterns you see, discuss those patterns with your students, right? Hey, I noticed this. Most of you said you feel you have a lack of confidence about doing MLA. I'll make sure we do that really slowly together. Or a lot of you, when you had to analyze a short story, focused on this element, which is great, but only a couple of you focus on this one, which is going to be a major element that we focus on in this class. Just keep that in mind going forward, right? So discussing some patterns you see with your students, I think can give them a sense of, okay, good to know, right? What am I expected going forward in this class? Okay? And so that's that blog post. And again, you have here about my experience doing this, my approach to it, how students have responded, how I've used it. So I do have those videos as well about the last section, about the major assignments, and how I introduce them. I do it during week 1 a lot of the times. All of them I introduce during week 1. And then again, the student self-assessment. So that's that last one there as part of the series in particular. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is in this first one where I talk about the workbook itself, I talk about it here, but in the sections you can see all these are linked to the actual blog post. So from this one post you can go to all the other 5 just to make it easy to navigate on my site. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as well if you're looking through the blog post and the videos. All the videos are in the blog post and all blog posts are listed in this particular page, which I'll link below for easy access. Okay, but in the actual workbook, if you go on down here, right, I talk about what I do for my assessment, why I like to do it, what the goal of it is, an example of how exactly it can go. So basically very similar to the blog post, but I have here kind of more all right, here's information on how to approach this, right? So some potential goals that you might have. I give a few more examples here than I do in my blog post, just to get into more detail for you. But then you can go ahead and see, do you want to do this process? I kind of walk you through it in the workbook itself, give you some example questions of what to ask in your assessment in case you don't know where to get started. These are a few that I've used in my own classes that you can use in yours as well, with just some tweaking depending on the course that you teach. Okay, so I do have quite a list of example questions for you. And then a final note about how to respond to student concerns. Okay, so I give an example of that as well. And of course, note taking if you need it. And then on the bottom here, I have some bonus content as well. So the first homework assignment that I give to all of my courses where they introduce themselves, as well as information about some things I have on my Teachable account in my school. So I have some grad student journal entries, right? Some journal layouts in case you want some organization for your grad school life if you're teaching as a grad student, right? As well as if you want to try out a digital bullet journal. I have a course or some just the journals themselves, not along with the course in case you're interested in that. And this last one that I've added, recently is that Hyflex collection, right? So if you click on it, it'll take you straight there. And as I showed before, it's basically this PDF that gives examples for activities that you can use in your classroom, as well as when you go to the actual course. So I'll give you a little preview here. So first you basically download the PDF, and then I have on here how to actually use the templates that are involved in the collection. So the Pear Deck templates that you can use for lecturing, as well as exit cards. Mentimeter prompts that you might use in case you want to use that for your exit cards or for your lectures, as well as the checklist that I create, the template I created for you that you can go ahead and edit and then give to your students as well. So I have 3 videos of how to use the templates that are included, and then I have some additional resources for you as well that are just easy to find. So again, a very simple course in case you're interested in seeing that collection of Hyflex activity ideas. I've used all of these before, with the exception of the large activity. I've used this in past courses that are face-to-face, but I'm using it now because I'm teaching a literature course this semester, so I will be using it in my Hyflex of this semester as well, because I have a few at least who have exemptions to stay on Zoom, so I want to make sure that it still works for the format that I'm teaching in. Okay, so if you're interested in the collection, I'll go ahead and link it below. And that's basically it, right? So I wanted to make sure how the Successful Start series works, what you can find in each of these blog posts and in these videos, the free workbook that's part of my resource library. And as I show here, so I have that one, but I do have other ones as well in the library. So my post about top 10 teaching tips, which I highly recommend reading if you're new to teaching. There's an ebook version as well as a blog post itself. I have a PDF with my top teaching tips or teaching tools that I use for online or digital teaching. So these are 18 tools with tutorials for each of them in case you are considering using other ed tech. And again, just some extra PDFs, templates, checklists, etc. from past blog posts. Okay, so all that's available for free in my resource library. Okay, so again, if you have any questions about this content, go ahead and ask me below and I'll answer as soon as I can. If you have ideas for what you want me to talk about in the videos coming up this semester, any particular aspects of teaching that you want advice on or tips on or activity ideas you want, go ahead and let me know, right? So I do have a survey you can answer in the description of this video. If not, you can just comment with your suggestions. Hey, I love a tutorial on this, or maybe ideas for that. I'm here to help, right? So go ahead and do that if you need the extra assistance and have ideas for me of what to talk about in future videos. Okay. Again, tomorrow I'll have the Icebreakers video for different situations. So again, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do so. Click like if you found the video helpful. I would really appreciate that. And that's basically it in a nutshell. All right. So I'll see you next time.